Welcome back to another edition of Green is Good. This is the Hollywood edition of Green is Good, and we've got my friend and co-partner and co-host today, Debbie Levin, with us. She's the president of the Environmental Media Association, and we've got for her second turn on Green is Good, Ethan Brown, the CEO and founder of Beyond Meat. Welcome to Green is Good, Ethan.
Thank you very much. I appreciate being
Now,
here.
we have you in person today. Next time we have you, we're going to go down to your location. We're going to eat some of your...
cook, right.
We're going to eat and cook and eat right there and show our listeners and our viewers how amazing and delicious your products are.
Thank you. Well, that's what we love to do. We love to show people that plant-based protein can be a real source of protein for the center of the plate and enjoy it just like you do animal protein.
Well, it's amazing because I'm a vegan for many years and I eat your products all the time, and they are truly just delicious.
Thank you very much for saying that.
Truly delicious. You know, for our listeners and viewers that didn't get a chance to listen to the first time you came on, I want to start a little bit with the Ethan Brown journey. How did you even get here to become the CEO and founder of Beyond Meat and literally changing how we approach protein in the world?
Well, great. So it's a long story, and I'll try to just give the highlights of it. So I really started when I was a kid. I was exposed at an early age to animal agriculture. My dad is a professor, but we had a hobby farm that became a business for him. And so I learned a lot about livestock and dairy cattle in particular, and just sort of took that information with me and went on into a career in the clean tech space where I worked on fuel cells for a long time. Hydrogen-powered fuel cells, which is great technology.
We actually work with Toyota forever, and we're helping them launch the fuel cell car.
So it's a really wonderful technology.
I'm so glad you're saying that.
Yeah. No, it's great. I worked almost 10 years in the
Wow.
sector. And
So you were early on that stuff.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. I worked for the best company in the world, Ballard Power Systems,
Wow.
leading PEM fuel cell exchange membrane. So it was a really, really great experience for me. But it kept coming back to this question of, what if you could basically take the animal out of the protein production equation? Like, what if you could think about getting amino acids, lipids, carbohydrates, minerals, and water, not from an animal, but from plants, and building animal muscle, essentially, with those direct parts. Because that's all the animal's doing. They're basically taking from grass, right, and now from feedstock, and assembling amino acids, lipids, and carbohydrates in a certain form that we're very familiar with. So the thought was, why not go ahead and do that directly? And I knew something about technology because I'd worked in the clean tech space, and had a real passion for this because I felt that by doing that you could simultaneously solve or contribute to anyway the solution for 4 different problems that I cared a lot about. One was human health, and I looked at heart disease, diabetes, cancer.
Right.
That was climate, and I do believe that Robert Goodland and Jeff Anang are right, and I've yet to see a convincing scientific analysis that suggests they're not. That livestock contribute to the most greenhouse gases of any singular cause today. And they said about 51%. So whether it's 30% or 51% doesn't really matter. It's a massive contributor to greenhouse gas.
It's true.
The second would be climate, and the third, natural resources here in California with the drought, et cetera. The fourth is animal welfare, which is something that was near and dear to my heart. So I said, okay, if you can basically affect all of those things by changing out the 3 or 4 ounces at the center of your plate, isn't that something really meaningful? And then you say, okay, well, how do I get people to do that? They're not going to stop eating meat. There's no way that's going to happen.
It's true.
Yeah, and in fact, the world is going the opposite direction. As countries commercialize, as countries industrialize, they're consuming more meat. So the quest then became, how do we basically recreate meat directly from plants? And I don't mean make a soybean behave like steak. I mean, how do you actually rebuild meat?
I mean, this is incredible.
This is amazing.
And what's so cool about it is you can do it. That's the really neat part about it, is you can take those constituent parts and you can assemble them in the
And what year was this when you had the epiphany, the germs of this idea?
Yeah, sort
Germination.
2006, 2007, started thinking about it. And it took me a while to get comfortable with the idea. I was anxious about kind of taking a career which I built in clean tech and becoming the guy that produces tofu. I didn't want to do that. And so I really wanted to take a sort of rigorous scientific approach to it. So I read a lot and learned what some very bright people were doing in the space, and contacted some scientists at the University of Missouri and asked them if I'd come out and talk to them, and I did, and they just blew me away, and so started working with them. It was pretty neat.
Oh my gosh. So talk a little bit about the journey from the beginning to now. We're in 2015, and Beyond Meat's in Whole Foods. I mean, you're becoming part of our eating vernacular in terms of if you're into vegetarianism or veganism or just giving your body a break.
Sure.
You're now part of that, the future.
Yeah, well,
How did that go? I mean, how's that journey been? And talk a little bit about raising the money, which
Sure.
we're gonna, I'm gonna ask you some other questions. You know what I'm asking you.
Okay.
But and how's that gone?
Right. So I view it as a real blessing, and there's a Victor Hugo quote that I like to say, which is there's nothing more powerful than an idea whose time has come, and I really view that about what we're doing. I think I somehow have been fortunate enough and blessed enough to be part of an idea that's coming around at the right time. And so if you look at when I was growing up, the book that my parents had on the shelf for child rearing was by Dr. Spock.
Right.
Right. In that book, he talks about the vegetarian diet being, the best diet for children. And of course, meatloaf was at the dinner table, on most nights for me, right? And so it's not like these are new ideas. And then you look at Diet for a Small Planet, published in 1971. So it's that there somehow is a tipping point. And that happens to be happening now, and I happen to be working on this idea at that time, I think. And so for me, it's been a process of being part of some momentum that is much larger than myself, and it gets to tapping into kind of what you feel most passionate about and what your heart is telling you. And once you do that, things start to happen that are pretty interesting.
And for our listeners, we've got Ethan Brown. He's a CEO and founder of Beyond Meat. To find out more about Beyond Meat, go to www.beyondmeat.com. We're not going to let the show go by without talking about some of your bigger investors. You have Biz Stone, you have Bill Gates.
Sure.
Why your ideas come. Why did they invest in your idea that's come of the time? What got their attention? What got them really so excited about Beyond Meat?
Sure. So it's first, they're just fantastic guys, and it's been there's a generation now of investors that are putting their money where their values lie. And I would
How did they find you?
Yeah,
Sure.
great question.
So when I first got involved with the University of Missouri, I worked for them for about 2.5 years with them, just trying to commercialize this technology. And it's basically a process of taking and this is not the right word, but it's easy to explain it this way, disorganized protein and amino acids and organizing it in the fashion of muscle or animal protein. And so we were taking amino acids and running them through this heating, cooling, and pressure process. And there's no chemicals, there's nothing. If you're comfortable eating pasta, you should be comfortable having our products. And so I was working with them on that. We got to the point where it was something that could be commercialized. And so at that time, Time Magazine came in and ran a piece on the technology. And this is a story about the I always say that big companies have R&D programs and entrepreneurs have universities, and so I'm always amazed that people don't just go to universities for the next greatest idea. And so that's what I had done, and I was working with the University of Missouri. They got contacted by a firm called Kleiner Perkins, and being the good sort of Midwestern values and everything else, they said, you know what, we're already working with a guy. And it was just me, spending money out of my pocket, whatever. And so I had the license to the technology, so I started to and I had offers from other firms other than Kleiner Perkins for less of my company and for more money. But I called up a friend who was a vice president at one of Kleiner's companies, and I said, should I do this deal with Kleiner? And he said something funny to me. He said, even if it's a total disaster, he said, working with Kleiner will be a great thing.
Wow.
And so it was a really good plug for them. And so I turned down the other offers and I accepted Kleiner, and it was a great decision because they've done everything they said they were going to do.
And they brought you these investors.
What they did was, so they sold. They basically positioned it as not only the people that work there and their networks. And I just got off the phone equipment here with Ray Lane, who's the guy who's on our board, and he's just a terrific individual. It's the network they have. And so when it came time to expand our funding and to bring on other investors, they made introductions, and it's incredible who they can introduce you to. And so one by one, we're able to assemble this group of people that are very passionate about disrupting industries that need to be disrupted.
Right.
So I think the question was, about Biz and Bill Gates and Ev and those guys, was why would they be interested in this?
Yeah.
And if you look at what they've done, they've transformed computing, they've transformed communication, And this is a process that we've been, relying on for 2 million years, the consumption of animal protein, right? So what would be more fascinating than disrupting that?
Can you explain your products? Like,
Sure.
really explain what they are,
Sure.
what they look like,
Sure,
what
sure.
they taste like,
Sure,
so that we all know what you're talking about?
Sure, yeah. So the first product came out was a chicken product, and so it was basically plant-based chicken, and so what we really focused on was the fibrous texture of chicken. So if you pull apart a piece of chicken breast, it kind of has that striation that you're very familiar with, and that's very important to how it feels in your mouth and on your teeth. And so we worked very much on replicating that through using plant-based inputs. So we used pea protein, soy protein, and others, and we ran it through this process that reorganized those proteins so they take on that muscular fiber. And then we introduced a beef product, which is
Well, so wait, going back to, what are you buying when you buy the chicken? Like, what does it look like?
right. It looks like a strip. So
you're buying chicken
yeah,
strips?
Yeah, exactly. Chicken strips. Yeah. And so the success that we had early on was Mark Bittman came out to our facility, which at the time was in rural Maryland, and tried saw the process and headed us up to New York, and we basically put dishes that were animal protein and plant protein right next to each other. And he had trouble telling us the difference between the two.
Wow.
So that he wrote big articles in the front page of the Sunday Review talking about that and what that meant.
I remember those articles.
Yeah. So that really put us on a path to people taking it seriously. We had other really good media events where, like Good Morning America, same type of thing, where they couldn't tell the difference, right? And so that became something people associated with our company, that if you want something that's really like meat, go ahead and have something that Beyond Meat has produced. And so the future for us, though, is not just about replicating the meat experience. It's also about improving upon meat. And so I'm a big fan of Elon Musk's and of Tesla, and I believe what he's done is right, which is, if you're going to ask people to shift away from something that may be environmentally damaging, right, do it in a way that's going to excite them and inspire them. And so what we're doing with our newest products, for example, the Beast Burger, we're creating things that the animal couldn't create. So the Beast Burger, for example, has antioxidants, has omegas, it has calcium, it has all these things you wouldn't get if you had a cow or a chicken.
Looks like, tastes like, but is enhanced.
Right, exactly.
Right.
And so it's a better experience for you, so it should draw you to it. And so people say, well, why aren't you more active in Meatless Mondays? Because I actually don't believe in Meatless Mondays. I don't believe that you should be asking people to sacrifice. You should provide them with something that's better so they go to it 7 days a week, right? So it's not something where they say, if I can just get through this day, I can then have some meat.
Right.
That's not the way you change the world.
Got it.
Henry Ford wasn't like, hey,
Take the
let's
car
do
out on Monday.
one day, right? The horse-drawn carriage the rest of the week. It's just not the way innovation works. So,
Right.
yeah.
So it's chicken, it's meat.
Yeah.
Chicken.
And actually this year we're working on something which is, I think, groundbreaking, which is a raw beef product, which is fabulous. I think it's so cool. So you'll be able to take it home, you'll be able to manipulate it with your own hands.
Oh
put
my
it on the grill.
God.
Yeah.
It is cool. And that is made out of a
Wow.
combination of pea protein and yeast. And so yeast is a fascinating input. It has actually a higher amino acid profile than beef. So and it's abundant, right? So you can get yeast from a
Wow.
brewery, right? So
Wow.
so it's a real opportunity to create some new protein platforms.
That's amazing.
It's pretty cool stuff.
So, you talk about the process of making your great products. When people bite into it, what do they tell you their experience is like? I'm a big fan. I eat your products,
Thank you very much.
and I love them. I mean, and they burn real clean in me. They make me feel strong.
Correct.
They feel great. What is, when you're out there talking to your consumers and your growing base
Right.
of fans, how does that work?
Sure. So it's really around allowing people to continue to eat what they love. I mean, that's a big thing for me. Is you can only pick so many battles in a day, and so our battle is not to convince people to eat kale and quinoa. Like,
Right.
that's terrific for them.
Right.
My own kids, I try to get them to eat as much as they possibly can. But it's really around allowing people to enjoy the dishes they grew up with, but having healthier versions of it, right? So that you can have that lasagna that you want. You can have tacos not just one night a week. You can have 3 times if you feel like it, because there's no cholesterol, there's no saturated fat in it, right? So we're going to deliver on that promise of what it's like to bite into a piece of meat, what it's like to feel satiated and full, but not have the downside, not have the cholesterol, the saturated fat, not have the carcinogens, et cetera. So it's all about delivering what people love and taking away the downside.
And it's much different than the other soy products that are out there, or grain products that are.
So for me, the point of departure really is, and it's a big one because it costs a lot more money to do it this way, but I want to rebuild meat directly from plants. Like, I believe very strongly that you can think about meat in two ways. You can think about it where it's from, and you can get hung up, and there's not very many productive solutions that come from that. You can't make an animal much more efficient than it is. And this gets back to the climate thing for a second. So one of the things that Robert Goodland did, who was the scientist behind the economist rather, behind the 51% greenhouse gas emission figure I cited, he actually added in the fact that animals are all respiring and they're emitting carbon when they do that. They're all breathing. And as part of that process, they're emitting carbon. And there's an unnatural number of animals on the Earth's surface. So, you can do a lot of things in terms of manipulating animals, but you can't create one that doesn't breathe. And so there's sort of an inherent, right, there's inherent efficiency limit for the animals. But with us, we can basically break through that efficiency limit and create a really, really efficient process. So it's all about transitioning people away from the concept that you have to get meat from an animal and thinking more scientifically about what meat is. So if you describe meat in terms of its core parts, it's those 5 things I mentioned. It's amino acids, lipids, carbohydrates, minerals, and water. That's it. So if I present you with those same 5 things in the same exact architecture as what you find in animal muscle, who's to say that's not meat?
I have a really practical question. Like, what's the in terms of price, and where's the distribution for this?
Sure. So we're in about 7,000 stores now, everywhere from Whole Foods through to Target. And in terms of price point, a couple different answers. One is, there's parts of the animal we'll probably never be able to compete with, which is like the remnants and the very low value parts of the animal. Because we get asked a lot, well, can you make pet food and so on? So yeah, we can do that. But the pet food is full of things that they're very low. Chicken breast, for example. We can be very cost competitive with a chicken breast. If you look at what Tyson and Purdue sell in the store today as chicken strips, we're actually already competitive today.
Wow.
And that's a pretty interesting statistic, or point rather, because our scale is so small compared to their scale.
Yeah.
And if we can already be competitive today.
Wow. Imagine.
Right? What is that once we start to scale?
Right.
Yeah.
So you are in Whole Foods, you're in Targets.
Yeah, so we're in Whole Foods, we're in what would be Safeway out here, Ralph's, et cetera. We're in Vons, we're in Texas with H-E-B, and Publix in the Southeast.
So 7,000 stores.
7,000 stores.
So if they go on your website, beyondmeat.com, they could
get
just put in a zip code locator and find out where they are close to you.
Absolutely.
That's tremendous. That the distribution is already amazing.
It's
and
been great.
accessible.
It's been great, and I think it's about this concept of let's allow people to continue to eat what they love, and I think that's really my point of departure is people aren't walking around defending the landline. They love the iPhone, right? And so you have to give them something that's better, right? And so my entire focus is always on how do we create a better experience for consumers so they'll desire this versus feel compelled to have it.
Right.
Go on.
Sorry. What kind of marketing do you do for this?
So we have really. I love this part of our company. I hired a guy. So the head of our marketing is from Silk Soy Milk, and I loved what they did in terms of getting into the dairy aisle, and that's very important to me.
We used to work with them. That's interesting. Yeah.
So I really want people to be able to walk into the supermarket and buy protein, not buy meat and meat alternatives. So when you walk into progressive grocers, it should be, you have basically a protein aisle. And we can create this ground beef, for example. We can create it ultimately from things like lentil protein. We can create it from camelina. You can create it from different feedstocks, right? So people could come in and they could pick an animal version or one that's from many different types of proteins and plants. But today we're nowhere close there. But on the marketing side, we're able to get some really interesting people involved. So Jeff Manning, who was the architect of the Got Milk campaign, we hired him, right? Because we want to basically recreate the Got Milk campaign, but with plant protein, right? And so we have 3 tenets of our marketing program. The first is to prove the taste and texture. And so we're out there, sampling, we're on shows, et cetera, having people taste it, blind taste tests, et cetera. The second is really to demystify plant protein. So for moms, we have to make them super comfortable. This is something that's very healthy for their family, right? Because people say, oh, it's processed, et cetera. So we want to explain that hey, here, I'll take peas as an example. Our peas are grown in very rich soil in France. They're separated, the protein's separated through water. So it's an aqueous process. And then it's heating, cooling, and pressure, and that's it. So it's in many ways a much more direct process than industrial animals, right? And then the third is we want to create this desire. So we're working with athletes and celebrities to
we should be working together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So if he's listening, we're waiting for DeAndre Jordan to sign this.
But yeah, because I think that it's the education process and it's getting the people to endorse you and to support what you're doing.
Your entertainers, I'm sure, are eating.
Yeah, because honestly, our community is not that aware of your company.
Yeah. So what I find to be, if I could look 5 years in the future, I want to be able to walk into a gym in America and see, whether it won't be Derek Jeter anymore because he's retired, but somebody up there on that sign with a Got Milk-esque argument about our product, right? So it's I was amazed that you can walk into high schools all across the U.S., into cafeterias all across the U.S., and see one protein advertising, and that's milk.
Right.
So I would like to be that protein.
Right.
And so that's why we made the hires.
Right.
But I mean, and Debbie's line of questioning is great in terms of how you're marketing this thing, and it's so interesting. I mean, you got the Got Milk guy. I mean, talking about getting the guy.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, but is there also a B2B vision of yours
There is.
on going to chefs and food platforms across the United States beyond the B2C?
yeah. So a thing that's very near and dear to my heart is school lunch program. So we're working hard on that because it's a way to get kids to start doing this early. in their
That's the
lives.
harder one, because
Yeah.
getting through with because we have gardens in schools
Yeah.
in Los Angeles and
Yeah.
LAUSD, and we actually work with their after school program so that we don't have to fight with the system. And
Right.
it's worked so incredibly. We go into any school we want,
Yeah.
but if we were telling them how to change their school lunches, we
Yeah.
would still be on our first school
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
of having right.
Yeah,
It's kind of a
tough.
nightmare. I know.
It's hard.
But
It's
it's great. I mean, that is where you need to go. But it's also through the parents.
Yeah.
So it could be through the all the parent associations
Yep.
as well, because that is really it's at home.
Yep. Yep.
And-
And that's where you start. We're also working with one of the largest quick serve restaurants. So there'll be something hopefully that we'll announce later this year, as well as the leading meat company in a certain sector. So we're actually coming out with a product with them. So it'll be all vegan and all plant based, but it'll be co-branded. And
That's great.
Yeah. So it's pretty exciting.
That's scale.
That's
great. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
become starts. Do you talk to Biz or to Bill Gates at all about marketing, about scaling, do they coach you at all in terms of where their experience have had success?
Yeah. So with Biz, the guy's brilliant on marketing, and so you definitely want to touch base and get his thoughts. And a lot of the stuff you've seen. I was wearing a shirt yesterday which had a direct quote from him on it, and he's a remarkably. Both him and Ev are extremely creative guys. Bill Gates, I've had the opportunity to sit down with twice, and he's not as accessible.
Wow.
But
Hey,
he's
twice
great.
as much more than anybody else has sat down
He's
with
a
him.
great guy.
You know.
And it was interesting. They had me so scared to go in there and pitch him, because they're like, he's going to find a number in your presentation that somehow doesn't compute, and he's going to have you do it right there on the spot. I'm like, oh man, all right. So I went in there. I was like, all right. As I was going in, 3 guys were coming out in like rumpled suits, and first of all, I hadn't worn a suit. So I was like, oh, this is going to be really tough, because these guys come out with suits, and they look kind of demoralized and everything. Go in there, he's the nicest guy in the world. Talked about his family, about his kids. His big point about the company and his enthusiasm for it was, if you can drop the price of this below the price of meat, and if you can scale internationally
Yeah.
quick enough, you can make a real contribution to human nutrition. That's what got him motivated.
Yeah.
We're down to the last couple minutes, and I know, marketing and getting the word out is really so much of the battle. Ethan, I know you do events every year. Can you give a little plug for the events that you have coming up here in 2015?
Sure. So one thing we did was just quite fun at Expo West, which just happened. We did a McDonald's. So we turned the M on its side and turned it into a B. And
I was there. I didn't see that.
Yeah, and so it was very
That's
popular.
awesome.
Yeah, it was cool.
That's great.
We did it with Taco Bell last year, and the New York Times ran a piece on it. But we're trying to enforce this idea that, look, this is mainstream food that you can actually go back to enjoying and not feel guilty about eating.
Right.
But we're doing a series of activations around this concept of the kind of Got Milk campaign I was mentioning. We're doing barbecues with athletes and events.
awesome.
It's Sport Spectacular coming up here soon in LA. So we're really trying to show that people who are fit and healthy, but yet want to enjoy great tasting food, are embracing these products in droves.
Where else can our listeners and our viewers find you, besides beyondmeat.com?
Right. So we're very active on Twitter, Facebook, and out in the community. I mean, you come to a store, you'll see us there. We have a lot of people out in the field working on our.
Well, in a couple months, Debbie and I are going to come, and we're going to bring
Great.
one of her celebrities from Environmental Media Association. We're going to come to your facility,
Great.
and we're going to sample
Great.
these great products with you.
Come try the raw ground beef. I think you guys will be blown away.
I am so excited
It's crazy.
about all this
We'll
stuff.
cook it
This
for
is
you, too.
amazing. Yes, yes.
Won't have you taste it.
You can buy
we don't
Beyond
want
You can buy
Although you
Beyond
could
Meat.
eat
You can buy Beyond Meat at 7,000 locations now across America. Go to www.beyondmeat.com, put in your zip code, and you can find it right there. I thank you for joining us today. Thank our guest, Ethan Brown, my co-host, Debbie Levin, and Ethan, turn and show the camera this. He is the Elon Musk of protein, the future of protein. Ethan Brown here. Ethan, You are truly living proof that
you.
green is good.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.